Welcome back. In this session, we are going to understand Azure pipeline. So in previous session, we have understood Azure DevOps and we also looked into there are different tools available in Azure DevOps and one of them is Azure pipeline. And as I said, this is most important tool and we are going to focus and understand this tool in this session. So what we can do with this Azure pipeline tool? So using this Azure pipeline tool, we can build our CI/CD continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline. Yes, so this is our continuous integration part of our application, right? So once here we have a developer, right? And when developer writing the code, then when he's pushing this code to the version control, then this code need to go with different steps, right? This need to be built, it need to be test, it need to be a scan, then artifact will be ready. So this is called continuous integration, right? Then this artifact go to the different environment, right? Development environment, QA environment, acceptance environment, then finally production environment, and this is called continuous delivery. So using this Azure pipeline tool, we are going to build this continuous integration and continuous delivery where we are going to handle each and every stage of all these steps. Now, what is this pipeline? Why this is called a pipeline? Let's understand this. So this is very simple. Now imagine this is a pipe, right? So when we have a pipe, right? So what happened? Let's say if you are putting some water over here, then this water will go from the other side, right? Similarly, if you see here, what happening here? In this, we have the developer, and when developer committing their code, and code is going to the version control, and from there, this is going to the different stage, right? And then finally, this artifact getting created, then this is getting deployed at the different environment, right? So in this pipeline, if you see, something is happening, right? So similar, you see here, we have this pipeline, and in this pipeline, if we are, let's say, putting the water, and this water need to get out from this end, so in between there could be different steps, right? So let's imagine there is the two stage where we are doing something with this water, let's say to purify it. So when we are, let's say, putting the water here in this pipeline, then we have the two stages, and in this stage we have some job. Let's say here we have a job 1 and here we have a job 2, right? So job 1 has some task, it has some task to filter the water, right? Again, job 2 has some another task, do another layer of the filtering of the water, then finally water is getting out over here. Same things happen in Azure DevOps pipeline. Okay, so if you understand this concept, then we are going to use same analogy to understand some important concepts of Azure pipeline. So simply here, yes, again I'm repeating here, here we have the pipe, right? We have the pipeline. In this pipeline we have different stages. Why different stages? Because we want to purify our water, right? So purify this water, in the stage 1 we have a job 1, and this job 1 has some task, right? Then again at stage 2 we have the another job, and this has the another task to do another layer of the filtering, then water is getting out, right? So now if you understand that, let's understand this some important concepts that we use inside Azure pipeline. Yes, so first things here we have the trigger, right? So in the previous example, so water need to flow, right? How water will flow? Either someone will just put the water, or we have the system from where water is coming, right? In terms of the Azure DevOps, we have the developer, and when this developer committing their code to GitHub, then this is triggering the pipeline. Yes, so when we commit our code, then push our code to GitHub, then this code is going at our GitHub branch, right? So this is one action. So based on this action, we can trigger. What we can trigger? We can trigger our pipeline. In that pipeline, we have the multiple stages. Yes, as you have understood in the previous example, right? Here we have multiple stages, right? In one stage we have the one job, right? Another stage we have another job. Similar here, in this pipeline we have multiple stages for doing different jobs, right? So this stage has a job, right? Again it has another job, correct? So this stage has the job, right? And in this job, what happening? In this job we have a task, okay? And this task could be script as well. So what is the task? Task is something Azure inbuilt task. So let's say if you want to install the Node.js, right? So Azure DevOps has inbuilt task that we can use to install Node.js. We can also write our own script if you want to, let's say, connect with the virtual machine. If you want to delete the storage, right? So we can write our own script as well. Now let's try to understand again this whole concept as well. The way we have understood this in the previous diagram, here you see we have this pipe, right? Pipeline. This pipeline has the different stages. Similar, in Azure DevOps pipeline, we have the different stages, right? So we have the pipeline, right? And this one pipeline could have the multiple stages. This could be maybe build the application. This could be for the test the application, and this stage could be for the deploy the application. Okay. Now at this stage, when we are building, right, then it has some job, right? So this is the job, right? Now to perform this job, to perform this build in the build stage, to perform the build job, right, we have to have some script, some task, right? So this need to be written. Again, I'm going to show you practically how this looks like, but this is something you need to understand. One important concept here, we have here agent, right? Now if you see, let's go back to our initial CI/CD. So here we have this build, right? This building the application. When we build the application, right, so this need to be happen somewhere. This need to be happen somewhere. So if we have our application on our local machine, and we go and run npm build, right? So where this build is running? This build is running on my local machine, right? Similar, if this build need to be run in Azure pipeline, then we need a virtual machine, right? On that virtual machine, we need all the software that need to build the application, correct? So to run this CI/CD pipeline, right, where it will execute, where it will build our application, where it will test our application, where it will scan our application, to do all this job, right, we need a virtual machine, right? And this is called agent in terms of Azure DevOps. Yes, so this is called agent in terms of Azure DevOps, and this agent could be two type. One is Microsoft managed agent, another could be self hosted agent. Okay, so basically we need a virtual machine where this job need to be run, right? In this job we have all these tasks, so either we can use Azure managed agent or we can bring our own hosted agent. So when we created our Azure DevOps account, so by default we got a free minutes. Okay, I will show you in the next session. So we got around 1800 minutes of the build. Okay, so they give you the agent, a virtual machine, and this will comes up again go away, so we will be able to run our build of around 1800 minutes. Okay, so that's come free of cost. Another way we can go ahead and create a virtual machine. On this virtual machine we need to install some software, and this is called build agent that comes from the Microsoft Azure. We will install this. Once we install this, then we can use this virtual machine as a agent, and for that we need to do some configuration. Maybe I will create one documentation and I will attach here. Well, so now this is some important concept we need to understand about the Azure pipeline. So we have the trigger, then we have the pipeline itself. This pipeline has the different stages, and each stage need to be run on some agent, some virtual machine, and then it has the job, and inside this job we have either we have the script or we will have the task. Well, now how do we create this pipeline? Let's understand this. So we can create this pipeline in YAML. So Azure DevOps supports a YAML file, and in this YAML file we can create our pipeline. So this name would be azure-pipelines.yml, and this in this YAML file we are going to define our CI/CD code. CI/CD configuration, I'm going to explain what will be code inside this configuration in a moment, but please understand this. So whole this CI/CD pipeline, Azure CI/CD pipeline, we can configure in YAML file, and this name should be something like this, Azure pipeline. We could have different name as well, but ideally we should use this. Okay, so when we create our pipeline, then we need to specify which file, in which file we have our CI/CD configuration. So if you give the different name, then it could be different, but default name should be azure-pipelines.yml. Now this file could stay with your application code. This will stay with your application code because we are going to trigger this pipeline based on the trigger, right? And once it will trigger, then it's going to find the configuration of our pipeline, and all configuration we are putting here, right? So when we are building CI/CD pipeline, whether for the application or for the infrastructure, so it's going to find the where is the configuration file, right? So that need to be live with the application, whether it's the application or maybe infrastructure, whatever, this need to be stay over there. Now for the application we run different pipeline for the different branch, for the different environment. Yes, try to understand. So ideally once you start working the corporate, you will see, let's say we have this application, and this application will have the multiple branch. So let's say this is the main, and this is, let's say, call as a prod branch. We can create the multiple branch, right? And then from this branch we will have one pipeline, CI/CD pipeline. This will deploy our application in the development, right? We could have another pipeline, right? And this pipeline again will have the CI/CD. This will deploy our application in the production environment. So when we, let's say, merge our code in the prod branch, then this is going to trigger this pipeline and going to deploy application in the production environment, right? What does it mean? It means each branch could have our own pipeline. So this is what I mean over here. So each branch could have its own pipeline. Now let's understand what kind of code and configuration we put in our Azure pipeline.yml. Well, so this is the sample code of Azure pipeline, and let's understand this one by one here. So first things first, here we have the trigger. Now remember, if you see our this architecture here, what we see, if you want to trigger a pipeline, right, so we need a trigger, right? If you want to start a pipeline, then we need a trigger, right, when you want this pipeline to start, right? So this is what we define first in our Azure pipeline configuration. So here you see trigger, and this trigger is main. Okay, so we are saying when there is any configuration changed in the main branch where this Azure pipeline is exist, right? If this Azure pipeline.yml exists in your application code, or maybe if in your infra code, right, then if someone is pushing the code in the main branch, then this whole pipeline going to be triggered. Okay, so this is what we have defined here. So when it going to be triggered, when someone is doing any changes in our main branch, right? So this pipeline will start and run whenever something is checked in the main branch. Okay, after that, here we have the variables. So in this whole pipeline we are going to write some code, right? And we have understood in all previous sections we should not hard code the value, right? So instead of, we should use the variable. So similar here in our Azure pipeline configuration, we can also define the variable, and these variables we can use throughout our configuration. So here what we see, we have the node version, right? Then build configuration is the release, then app name is mini finance. So if you see here, this variable node version we are using here, right? We are using version, right? Node version, right? Again in the display name node version. So as we are using this multiple times, instead of hard coding all those value here, we have defined this in a variable. So all variables of this pipeline will go here. Then we have the stage, right? Again this is very logical, correct? Now if you see again with this architecture, so in this pipeline, once we have pipeline, right, in this pipeline, then we have the stage, correct? So again this stage we have the job, right? Again in to run this job we need the agent, right? Then we have the script, or maybe you can have the task as well. And this is what we are seeing here, how all those things write as a code in our Azure pipeline.yml, right? So we have the trigger, we have the variable, then we have the stage, right? In this stage, okay, this stage is for the build, right? We could have also a stage for the test, we could have a stage for the deploy, right? We could have the multiple stage here. In this sample I'm showing just one stage, right? But we could have the multiple stage in this Azure pipeline, right? And this stage is for the build. And what we are saying, this is a display name. Display name is the name that will appear in our pipeline. I will show you in the next demo session. So you are saying install dependencies and clone the application. Okay, so in this stage, okay, we are going to install all dependency and clone the application. And for doing this task, right, we have here job, right? And in this job we have, okay, now this job need to be done somewhere. Where it will run? For that we need a agent, right? So this is the agent, and here we are using VM image Ubuntu, and this is Azure managed. Okay, we can also use our own agent as well. Okay, so Microsoft hosted agent, and which operating system? Ubuntu machine. Here we are using, saying use Ubuntu machine as a agent, right? So to recap, to run this job, right, we need a agent, right? So this is the agent. Then we have the different steps, right? And this, sorry, different steps, and these steps we have the different task and the script. So now if you see here, this is our task. What is the task? Install node. So this is Microsoft DevOps Azure task. So if you write something like this, so it's going to install node.js. So this you can go and find from the Azure DevOps documentation. So it simply means just you are telling here to install node.js, and that's all. So this is going to install node.js for you, and in this task we need to provide which version you want to install, right? And here we are going to install 18.8, right? This node version you see here, right? You are using as a parameter, correct? So let me clean this. So this is to install the node.js. Again, this is the display name. So this name will appear in our pipeline. So this display name, right? This display name, this is going to appear in our pipeline. Then again, similar to the task, we have the script, and this is the manual script. So we want to run something by our own. We are writing this script, right? So here apt update, then install nginx, right? Again, there could be the multiple task as well. As you see, clone the application, but as this was not fitting in the PPT, so I didn't put it here. But now you understand how do we write our Azure pipeline. Well, this is very important session of this section, so I would say please watch it multiple time and make sure all these concepts are clear to you. In next session we are going to do hands-on, where we will deploy a sample index.html to the Azure virtual machine using Azure DevOps pipeline, and for that we are going to create the azure pipeline.yml file. Well, thank you so much. See you in the next session.